If it's one sentence, it's that liquid honey can't be trusted. Most consumers do not know that 70 to 80% of all liquid honey is actually fraudulent, and it's cut like drugs. Yeah, there's a statistic from a research firm that works in the restaurant industry, and it was that 75% of consumers are aware of honeycomb,
Yeah.
but only 25% have tried it.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense because $30, it's kind of hard to find. It's, our first partner was Safeway Northern California, so they've been a great partner. We have Albertsons Vaughn's Pavilions in SoCal. We have a number of Safeway banners and Albertsons banners in the Pacific Northwest, United Texas.
What has been your recipe to revenue? What's been your secret sauce?
Our recipe to revenue, and it's one thing.
Hello, welcome back to Recipe to Revenue. I am so excited to be here today with Douglas Raggio of Pass the Honey. Douglas, thank you for joining us today and telling us your story about how you got this business going.
Thank you.
Yeah, so let's start with a little bit of background. What led you to found Pass the Honey? How did you get into this business?
If it's one sentence, it's that liquid honey can't be trusted.
Mm-hmm.
Most consumers do not know that 70 to 80% of all liquid honey is actually fraudulent, and it's cut like drugs. It's with processed sugars and syrups.
Yeah.
I saw an episode of Netflix in a series called Rotten, and the first episode was honey fraud, and that kind of exposed me to, people seek out the nutritional benefits of honey, the historical, millions of years of honey usage and our honey existence, and human usage. And here, through the miracles of industrialization and commercialization, we find ourselves in a situation where consumers are being defrauded. They're not getting their nutritional integrity.
Yeah.
And I thought honeycomb can't be faked. You can't heat it. You can't blend it. It's not being filtered. It's not being pasteurized. It's cut from nature. So how do we expose consumers or bring it back? Like, we're bringing honeycomb back.
Mm-hmm. So it's something that, long time ago, people used to be more accustomed to consuming.
It's the only way people would get honey. I mean, that was how the hunters, gatherers, and foragers would do it.
Mm-hmm.
The Industrial Revolution, did a lot of good, but it also, has its kind of rough edges, and liquid honey happens to be one of the worst rough edges I can think of.
Yeah. So going back to the basics, back to nature.
Yeah, I like big problems and things that people aren't typically looking at. I kind of learned that about myself early on, that it wasn't of interest to me to just do another beverage with a different ingredient. That that's great for certain rules, but no one's really looking at. There's a lot of hurrah and fanfare around saving the bees, but you also have to save the beekeepers, because the honeybee and the beekeeper underpins our entire food system. Food gets reborn without a honeybee. It's roots, root vegetables. That's and a lot of what we do is in service of the food system, and those that work with it and the consumers that benefit from it.
Yeah. So I've always been very intrigued about honeycomb. Like, when you see it, and do you how do you consume it, right? Like, you try to lick the honey off of it, but you actually chew the whole thing.
It's entirely edible. Most of our consumers snack it. We're seeing a lot more increased use as garnishes. Breakfast bowls, acais on top of pancakes, waffles, toast, biscuits. A lot of cocktail garnishes all of a sudden. And you can put on top of steaks and desserts and appetizers, obviously. So it's, I equate it to kind of like, if you can use a berry, you can probably use a honeycomb. It's a sweet snack or an elevated garnish.
Yeah. And it's just, from a graphic design perspective, like, there's something about the honeycomb that is just pleasing to, in its form. Yeah.
For the younger kids.
Right. Yes. Very. Yes. My household is a very pro honey household, and I always try to, keep away from the ones that look like they're the lesser quality ones. Because I don't why just give my kids the things that are just fake sugar, right? So we want the real deal.
I've worked in honey for now 8. I've worked in commodities for probably 10 years, and honey in 8. And people ask me, oh, where should I buy liquid honey? And it's like, I don't know. Your local farmer's market is your best bet. But even then, I don't know where those hives are and who's spraying pesticides next to it. Bees fly, pesticides drift. So we need a lot of acreage and places that are fully removed from industrial agriculture that still have forage zones, still have, access for us and access to water. And there's a lot of, we'll get into it, I believe, later, but a lot of criteria for dealing with an insect that's making your product.
Yeah, right. It's an interesting business partner, right?
It's very interesting, fascinating. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of layers to that one.
Yeah. Okay. So you saw the episode on Netflix that spurred your interest. Then how did you go about actually learning this industry, the honey industry, from there?
So I told you I had a commodities business. So I came from venture capital, private equity, in we're baby funds, nothing established, but in better for you foods. So the majority of my professional career was bringing better for you foods and packaged goods to market. The Whole Foods crowd, the Whole Foods Sprouts crowd. Didn't like working in venture because a win in venture is selling to most likely a large conglomerate, and that didn't feel right. My intention has always been to create more individual, privately owned companies. For think beyond a quarter profits. And so I started a private equity fund to go, invest in long-term businesses. And in that, we brought in a really toxic limited partner. I started getting run down. So I was making honey limited teas to boost my immunity. And just in the background, it's like, well, I'm looking for, to boost my immunity and my health. But I don't know what I'm putting in this, tea, because you can't trust liquid honey. So, I'm gonna buy honeycomb. So I went and I found it at the store, and it was $30 on a 14-ounce, plastic tray.
Right.
And I nicked a little bit off, put it in my tea, felt great, came down the next morning, and it was just covered in ants. And I was like, so I had to throw it away. It was $30, right? So I'm super bummed.
There goes $30. Yeah.
Well, I'm committed. I'm a passionate individual. I was like, I'm going to get another one. I'm going to put this in the fridge when I'm done with it. It sat in the back by the baking soda for, months. I'm not thawing my honeycomb before I nick a bit, for my tea.
Yeah.
So the idea was, what if this is conveniently portioned? What if it was individually portioned? If you change and you make something convenient, more people can use it, more people can try it. And that was my initial. So I actually happened to have utility patents globally on single serve honeycomb. That was the original catalyst. Was, look, here's something that can't be adulterated, that has the full nutritional benefits, that is single origin, single ingredient, but it's just a total pain in the neck.
Yeah.
And we're going to make it easier for consumers to use. And at that moment, I thought I was going to make, I was going to license the patent to other beekeepers, or to beekeepers, because I'm not a beekeeper.
Right.
And I was just going to make that mailbox money, just let that cash roll in. And so I started calling beekeepers in America, and it turns out I could not find a single commercial beekeeper, a decent scale, to sell us honeycomb, because there was so much prolific pesticide use, and the pesticides accumulate in the wax. So they wouldn't even sell us any volumes. And a lot of times commercial beekeepers don't even use, the bees don't make the wax foundations. They use plastic foundations. So that honeycomb structure, because they're not making money on honey anymore due to fraud pushing down prices.
Sure.
So I started getting exposed to this dynamic where beekeepers aren't price competitive on fraudulent imports against honey. So they're being forced into pollination services for monocrops, which exposes bees to further pesticides, stress, theft, disease, things of that nature, which is just a kind of a bad business for beekeeping. And that was where this is it's a messed up industry. It's really, it's messy. So that was the moment where I think, let's just build our own supply chain. Let's tackle this. There was no regulation from the USDA because there's no organic certification for honey. Spencer feed a bee, and organic's all about inputs.
Right.
So, well, that's interesting. I never thought about that. It's not about where the animals graze or what you put on the crops or the soil, because bees fly. So we ended up partnering with UC Davis to develop standards and practices that we considered regenerative. And due to high levels of fraud in the honey industry, and a lack of guidance typically, or not typically, just lack of guidance, period, that we decided to go outcomes based. So
Okay.
a lot of the organic practices are inputs based, and it's kind of self disclosure. We need to test, like we have to. So we spent 3 years with UC Davis developing a regenerative methodology that is outcomes based, that includes honeybee health, beekeeper livelihoods, and ecological diversity.
Yeah.
First of its kind, first for sure in apiculture. I believe it's the only regenerative methodology that has outcomes considered, which is weird. Because,
and what was it a multidisciplinary approach from UC Davis, or are you working with a biologist or
UC Davis? And it was the Mondavi Center for Pollinator Excellence. And then we worked with a group called Regenerative International, which is a known like regenerative supply chain. They'd worked with, I met them through Kiss the Ground, and they've done a lot of early work with Patagonia as well.
Excellent.
So the team there, us. And so we spent that 3 years making, the standards and practices. We did not want to do it, to your point, your question earlier, is we didn't want it to be us.
Yeah.
I'm not a beekeeper by trade, right? So it was about getting to a point and then welcoming the industry to contribute. So with UC Davis and Terragenesis, we did a white paper, we commissioned it, and we polled, I think, 300 something apiculture experts. Yeah. And we really identified the true problems in the industry. And then from there, we gifted all of that work into a proper 501c3. So as of today, we have the Regenerative Apiculture Working Group, and that is a 501c3, and it has 1 million acres for research committed that's completely removed from industrial agriculture. Amazing. And we're looking to launch 5 pilots. But that's like, as I sit here today, 7 years ago, I couldn't find sourcing in America, spent 3 years developing standards and practices to have the highest quality honeycomb in the world. And then we had to go find it. Like, who can meet these standards? And that took another 2 years. And we ended up working with 3rd generation beekeepers in Turkey. Turkey's a very large producer of honey. It's a kind of a cultural pride in Turkey. So we have 385,000 hives, 1,200 beekeepers. We worked through a group in Turkey. And then now we import and we pack here in the States, and then we sell it to consumers. But the point was to get industry buy-in, and that's where the working is in.
Yeah. So what was that feedback like when you went out there and you said, I want to change things up?
I don't think anyone agreed with anyone else. Like, there's just that much confusion. Everyone has their own beliefs, but we did get to a consensus of things to test. And that was really what the next phase is, our pilots. So launching these 5 pilots in the US to see if we can even produce quality comb to our standards. And so we end up working with and exploring options to a lot of marginalized communities, native populations, communities that maybe are far removed, that don't have an agricultural footprint. So that's been really fascinating to kind of see how that's evolved, because we need pretty remote landscapes, but those landscapes still have to have flowers and water and the things that bees need to supply and have nutritionally dense honey and comb. So I didn't expect it would take us 5 years to just solidify a supply chain. Yeah. And then the next, from there to now, it's been retail rollout, and now we're moving into food service. So a lot of more work.
That a cup of hot tea would turn into building a whole international supply chain.
Never forward. Well, nor would I think if I'm sitting at a dinner party, people ask, "What do you do?" I'd say I sell honeycomb. Like, these aren't things that people say in conversation normally.
Right. Yeah, but that's amazing.
It's unique. It's fun.
How did you get connected to the beekeepers in Turkey?
A lot of phone calls, friends, relationship building. It was more exploratory. Who's selling honeycomb? Who can export it? A lot of countries won't export their comb because it's just an agricultural good. It's not we're not a processed item. So when it falls in agricultural good, we fall under like produce laws, and so can't get out of the country. So it was a lot of, I wouldn't say trial and error. It was just a lot of conversations. And we ended up working with a known partner in the U.S., and then that known partner kind of shifted gears, and we shifted back, and now we have direct relationships with the beekeepers, the co-op in Turkey, and we work with them. The packing still happens in the U.S. because of quality control and visual inspections, and then we do all the part of our backstop is not just like the honeybee health, beekeeper livelihoods, and ecological diversity, but we use nuclear magnetic resonance testing to look for, one, contamination, sugar water feeding, which is also another form of adulteration. So sometimes either be sugar instead of letting them pollinate flowers, and that takes away from nutritional benefits.
Okay.
But we look for look for contaminants, adulteration from sugar water feeding. We do a pollen analysis to validate it's from the regions we've qualified. We do an on-the-ground audit with the beekeepers to make sure they're getting paid fair wages. And we're still developing kind of our ecological diversity measurements to understand how bees and flowers go together, but how do flowers and ecological diversity and robustness and soil health all kind of interact. And that's where a lot of the pilots are going to dig further into.
Yeah. Wow. That's it's so complex and such a so much texture to the story there. When I first moved from Maryland to New Mexico, like the allergies were absolutely killing me, and it turns out I'm like super highly allergic to two things I never would think about. One is pecan trees, and two is tumbleweed. And on the scale of out of 10, both those things are like 9 out of 10. And I would go to the local farmer's market, and they said, well, you need to eat the local honey, and that'll help with your allergies. So that was the first time I ever was exposed to anything like that, the local, flora and fauna would help, a biological effect on myself. So, it's been interesting to learn more about that. But yeah, you don't see honeycombs around as I've seen it in the grocery store a little bit here and there, or maybe a farmer's market, but it's not something that is very widely known, but more so now that you have your product in the market.
Yeah, there's a statistic from a research firm that works in the restaurant industry. And it was that 75% of consumers are aware of honeycomb, but only 25% have tried it. That makes sense because $30, it's kind of hard to find. And if you're buying a big brick, it kind of necessitates like you hosting an event to use it all.
Right. Yeah. What do you do with all that?
Parties every day at their house, not I.
Yeah.
So we come in with a kind of a trial size format. And when you change the format, you really introduce new consumers to the category. And that's been where we've seen the biggest lift for ourselves and our retail partners is bringing new people to the category. It kind of gives early avocado year vibes where, it's like, oh, what is that thing? It's a little strange looking. How do you open it? It's a little mushy. Doesn't last very long. Like that's all avocado problem. Right. But, if you look at the kind of the trajectory of the avocado, we're at that kind of early inception and just getting people comfortable with it and educating that you can eat it. It is entirely edible. It's the original gum,
Yeah.
So that's been fun to see. Ironically, when I started the company, I thought it was going to be kind of like your Whole Foods crowds. And you're kind of like rich millennial coastals, if you will.
Sure.
And it wasn't at all. They didn't know what honeycomb was. It was boomers, Midwest, rural. Because they remembered it. And
yes, they had more exposure to it.
Yeah. So it's like, it's completely inverted the CPG playbook that I knew.
Sure. Yeah.
That was something that we had to really adjust for. It was like, we're an agricultural good. We're more Driscoll's berry than anything else.
Oh, that's fascinating. I want you to talk a little bit about some of the partnerships. You talked a little bit about UC Davis, but what about the chefs and restaurants? What kind of partnerships have you launched with them?
All right. This is the cool stuff. So I don't even know where to begin. So I met my wife in San Diego at a coffee shop.
Okay. As many good romance stories start.
Yeah, I can tell that's a whole different story. 6 months, 9 months of watching her and barely smiling. She wouldn't even acknowledge me.
Oh my God, how cute.
But so we met, we got married, and she decided she wanted to go back to school and she wanted to go to culinary school. And so she chose the Culinary Institute of America, very prestigious.
Wonderful.
Institution. And so we sold everything and moved cross country from San Diego to upstate New York, which is where I'm sitting right now. And as part of that, I became a fellow at the Culinary Institute because I want to be more involved in the campus activities and its ecosystem. And through the amazing work of the advancement department and the fellows, we are actually launching a history of honey course at the Culinary, which is multifaceted. It's becoming bigger and bigger every time I meet with somebody at the school.
Yeah.
So ironically, a lot of culinary schools don't have sensory components. It's a lot of skills and techniques and math, kitchen math and, operational math. So we're bringing a history of honey course that goes into, it has a couple different segments, but one kind of portion is the history of apiculture, which is beekeeping, and agriculture. like the role of how it's evolved to become such a cornerstone of our food system.
Okay.
That's one. And then the other is a sensory component where we're bringing in Marina Marchesi, the honey sommelier, and she's doing a full sensory course for the students. So they will leave with a certificate of analysis or certificate of completion for honey sensory course from the American Honey Tasting Society.
Wow.
And it'll be the first, I think, time a sensory component's woven into an actual course. And then there'll be a culinary component, a lab, where students will be integrating honeys into global cuisines.
Yeah.
So that's like the course. And it's a 4.5 credit course, 50 hours. So it's a full course. It's not just like a weekend thing.
Yeah.
And we are a sponsor of the apiary on campus. So students will have hands-on learning in the apiary. We have a scholarship program for students that want to work under so that whole program is under the Applied Food Studies program, which is what my wife.
Okay.
And so we have a scholarship and an externship available for students. And then we're doing a global cuisines course. We're actually taking students to Turkey to experience Turkish cuisine and go on site and visit our apiaries.
Amazing. I love it. I love every aspect of that. It makes me want to go back to school.
It's cool. And then like for alumni, for chefs, alumni chefs, because it's kind of a unique thing, is we're going to do an online component for the sensory. So, alumni can come and do their continuing education and learn, the history and learn the nuance and terroir of honey. Like honey is no different than wine in the sense that it comes from a plant, that has region, different.
Yeah, there's difference in colors, taste, smell. Yeah.
And that is the last part of our commitment to the school. Is we're going to start with American honeys, but we're going to do a global honey archive at the library where general public can come taste a variety of global, honeys. And that's
wow.
To have all of that in one spot. And, some things may fall out as time goes on, but like the conversation I had last week was that they actually want to make a honey concentration perhaps. And I may be, jumping the gun here, but like that whole honey concentration at a globally renowned culinary institute, institution.
Yeah.
Never in a million years would I thought we could support the culinary industry with something like that, like real merit, like things of substance. And then, so that's kind of our commitment to the next generation of chefs. And then we had just launched with Performance Food Group. So we're getting more and more honeycombs into menus, a lot of kind of the called higher volume production. So hotels, resorts, things that, banquet programs, weddings. I'm talking to some wedding cake folks because St. Valentine is the patron saint of lovers and beekeepers. And there's a reason why it's called the honeymoon. Okay. So like we're talking about honeycomb on top of wedding cakes is like this symbol.
It comes full circle. I love that.
It's just like in retail, we're bringing new consumers to the category. Yeah. In a kitchen setting, our format requires no knife, no labor, and no waste. And so for a chef to be able to not have to throw away half that comb at the end of service, to be able to, just tong it out instead of having, a knife straight down, it's a little messy.
Right.
Our patents really, I think they have more applications in a kitchen than they do in a consumer kitchen. But it's been fun. I really enjoy working with chefs. They don't mince words. They have things to do. But we are bringing a real value to be able to bring a new experience to their diners and their guests. Again, people haven't seen honeycomb. What is that? A lot of questions. I've never seen people interact with a garnish like they do with honeycomb. So there is that theater in that. Like first time I had honeycomb was at X, restaurant. Like people remember that.
That kind of imprinted in their memory, for the lifelong. I love that. Yeah. And as you think of like different ingredients as they've kind of come into the light, in mainstream, like when almond milk first came out or, pomegranates, like going a little bit further back, it sounds like we're in the honeycomb era now. So
I think so. Like I said, we're bringing honeycomb back. Never
right. Exactly. I mean, when I think of like, the history of it, I mean, my mind goes back to like ancient Rome and ancient Greece, like
way further back.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. Mesopotamia, I don't know.
My wife, so she's in the Applied Food Studies program at the Culinary, which is food system, ways, and producer and quality and things of that nature. So she's doing her whole capstone on the history of apiculture through time, and like the things they're finding and she's bringing is just like what, just how it's intertwined with cultures. I mean, it had a lot of like religious ceremony or secular or even how like the bees are held in high regard, just like cows are in other countries. And
Yeah.
it's pretty
Fascinating.
cool. Just layers and layers and layers and layers. And so as a company, we try to steer clear of like the real kitschy cliche, save the bees. Like, no,
Yeah.
like let's really talk about like what's going on here. Most consumers know that bees, are having a struggle right now. And you ask them a follow-up question is, why is that important? They kind of, they get lost. It's like, well, because they underpin, we don't have a food system without a honeybee and a beekeeper.
Yeah.
So, and that's where we try to really make sure that we're not just talking about bees, honeybees, we're talking about beekeepers, we're talking about the ecologies that they live in. So,
Yeah. So would you say from the beekeeper side of it, is it a dying art or a growing industry? Where does it fall on the spectrum?
So beekeepers, God, last year I think was the worst on record. I think beekeepers lost 60% of their hives. So imagine if you have livestock.
Yeah.
And you lost 60% of your herd every year, or 40%.
Yeah.
You have to regenerate that. Like you actually have like new queens, new hives. They have to establish themselves before you can do anything.
Yeah.
So yes, bees are insects. They don't live a long time, but like the operation needs consistency and continuity. And so a lot of the beekeepers, again, because of all the fraudulent imports that are coming in, honey should not be as cheap as it is. It shouldn't be given away for free at Starbucks or wherever you're getting your honey packs.
Yeah.
That'd be like giving away wine. Like it should have that esteem, which is where historically it's been there, but in modern era it's been lost.
Right.
So I don't even know where I was going with that because I just got lost in my honey world.
Yeah. I know. I was thinking like those honey sticks that they're always handing out. Like I'm like, those. There doesn't seem like that's going to bring any nutritional value to your life. So I want to ask you now, because there's so much good and so much interesting that you're doing on the education side of it. How do you balance the for-profit aspect of your business with the nonprofit aspect?
So they're completely separate entities, which is nice. Makes it really clean for accepting donations, corporate donations, private things of that nature. But the elegance, dare I say, of what we do is that we want the highest quality honeycomb. And that comes from the best bees with the best beekeeping in the best environments. So it's almost this virtuous cycle.
Yeah.
So the more we invest in our supply chain, the more it's benefiting the aims of the nonprofit. And the nonprofit really becomes kind of a research advocacy policy arm. Not all, like that's its drivers because we're funding it. I mean, it kind of self-funds itself. It's self-funds due to the sense that, our ingredient is a singular good.
And then, so what is your team to do all these different activities? What does your team make up like?
On the company side, grossly understaffed. It is myself. It is a fractional assistant, a full-time salesperson. That was our one hire. Fractional ops, fractional finance. We don't have anybody in marketing, which is a total miss, but we're small and we're growing. And investing that much time and money into supply chain and then having to educate not only consumers, but also buyers and chefs, it's a pretty big lift. So we explore, I believe, some of because we have something super unique and really interesting, a lot of partnerships, I think, are coming to the table. And that's a way for us, because we're a complement, just like a garnish is a complement to a dish, right? Our company is a complement to others. Maybe it's a pancake company, maybe it's a berry company, maybe it's an acai company. So there's a lot of ways. Maybe a cocktail, a spirits company, which we have a couple conversations going right now with them. That's, I think, a way we can bring value to others and again keep our team lean. And it's not that I don't want a big team; it's just we can't afford it. We're doing a lot with a little so far.
Yeah, you're doing a lot. But partnership marketing is I think one of the most effective ways to do that when you're running a lean team and a lean budget to amplify your message.
And there's an ethos. When we first started, Terragenesis ran me through this kind of like ethos, like touchy-feely woo-woo stuff.
Yeah.
And what came out was myself and for the company, which is applied, is that like the company ethos, the statement we came up with, and still to this day, is that a small dedicated few can have an outsized impact. And that almost parallels the honeybee. I mean, it's a tiny little insect, but it has a massive impact in our daily lives.
Right.
And that's where we try to, keep the company. I'm not trying to have, a ton of staff and a ton of complexity. Like we have a very simple item.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it takes some, explanation, but once you get over that initial hump, like it's pretty cool.
Yeah. And so on the explanation part, and you alluded to it a moment ago about educating the consumer and chefs. On the consumer side, how are you trying to do that to educate people?
So Kroger, we just launched with King Supers and Fred Meyer's, and I believe we're going to be going broader soon. But they're a great example. They put we have very large dump bins, bright yellow dump bins with a big graphics. Snack it, smear it, pair it. Has a lot of language on what regenerative apiculture is on the side as well. A lot more language than you traditionally would have on a display shipper. But you're not going to explain what a walnut is to somebody.
Sure.
There's a little more explanation on what this is. So yeah, we have bright, 3 foot, 3.5 foot tall yellow bins right in the produce departments. Kroger was, very smart in the sense that in produce there's like a witticism, I guess you'll call it. It's stack them high and watch them fly, which is why you see big stacks of bananas, big stacks of oranges.
Yeah.
Same thing applies to honeycomb. So they have 2 bins at the end of their apple row, and that's just been turning units, and it's a natural complement to apples as well.
Absolutely,
so, yeah. So that's been in retail. It's a bright display. Can't miss it. It's yellow. It looks like a honeycomb. It's shaped like a honeycomb. And it's got, our little units in it. So
yeah, fantastic. So people can find you if they're near one of those stores, and then how about online? They can buy on your website.
Yeah, they can. We're not really focused on that. I might even pull it for all I know. It's our business really is B2B2C. It's our first partner was Safeway Northern California, so they're been a great partner. We have Albertsons Vons Pavilions in SoCal. We have a number of Safeway banners and Albertsons banners in the Pacific Northwest. United Texas, Jungle Gyms was an awesome first account. This like amazing retailer in Ohio. And then we're with Acme in the East Coast. We're with ShopRights in the East Coast. And then we're percolating up, right? We're talking to some others, kind of big names, but that's been our. Ironically, the Whole Foods and the Sprouts of the world just think we're a deli item, and we're not a charcuterie item. We're a snack. Like charcuterie is a use, but it's like 6% of our consumers use it for charcuterie. So 60% use it as a snack. So like, or garnish is 30%. So the numbers start to trickle out pretty quickly. So we've been in retail 2+ years now. We did a lot of testing of price. We did a lot of testing of placement. So we know our role now. We finally are in our lane. We know our price point. We know our placement in store. The next thing I'm tackling is the culinary side with chefs, right? Like how do we get more onto more menus? And where is our place in menus? Maybe that is charcuterie. Who knows?
Yeah. Or I can definitely see the cocktail side, like you mentioned with spirits, could be, I mean, there's just so much creativity you could have with that.
My dream is like a big breakfast chain, like an IHOP or a Denny's.
Yeah.
And for Culinary Week in June, they ask all their customers, do you want a honeycomb on that? And like a percentage of proceeds goes back to our nonprofit. Like that's the other
yes. Again, partnership activations. I mean, that's a great example.
It's legitimate. Like there's merit behind the nonprofit. It's not a greenwashing effort.
Yeah, right. No, no. You have the story to tell there and the impact. So you have so many different amazing things that you've done. What has been the thing that has been that you've been most proud of the last couple of years?
Most proud of is that we're doing the work that others aren't. I mean, it's almost dumbfounding to come across. We shouldn't be the ones doing this work. There should be people much larger, much more established supporting pollinators and beekeepers because of the role. When you apply for grants at the USDA and they tell you that pollinators aren't a priority and they haven't been a priority for 20+ years, like that's concerning to me. So, as difficult as it is, as big of a rock as we're pushing up a hill, I have utmost faith that it will hit the other side. We'll hit the peak, and not that I'll ever be smooth sailing, but we're doing something that has real meaning and real merit. And the fact we continue to show up every day, and partners of ours continue to show up every day, and groups like PFG and groups like Albertsons and Kroger take flyers. Like nobody knows, like nobody's put honeycomb in this format. They typically haven't sold it in produce, so there's a lot of people taking a lot of risk here. And it's proving well. So that's what I think I'm most proud of, is that we haven't, all those, days I want to fold the cards, but
those bad moves. Yeah, we all have those days.
Exactly. So But yeah, that's what I'm most proud of, is that we continue to show up and do the work.
Yeah. And then, looking forward, a lot of big plans on the horizon yet still. Where do you see, like, are there partners that you need or that would help, you mentioned the chefs that you're making some headway there. Where do you see the next couple of years going for you?
I think next couple of years, our focus as retail continues to build, that is working, and we know it. What we don't know is our food service kind of go to market. And so really talking to like larger operators to do things like limited time offers around Pollinator Week or get it listed on menus. So really talking to chefs and operators to build those programs and also make sure there's a mechanism to give back to the nonprofit.
Yeah.
That would be kind of the next phase. And I don't know how long that phase will be. You say a couple of years, it could be a month, it could be, 10 years for all.
Right. It all depends on, with those partnerships, who comes to the table, perhaps.
We're not going anywhere. Like my background in VC and private equity made me very certain that we weren't going to take venture capital or private equity. So it's privately funded, privately held. We can look, 20 years down the road. I don't, like I mentioned Driscoll's earlier, like that's really our North Star, to be the Driscoll's of honeycomb. Right. Is kind of where we're looking. So
I love it. All right. My last question for you today, and it's been such a great conversation to hear all that you're doing. I'm so inspired. And if you end up having any sort of course of the history of honey and all that on the, non-chef side, I'm in. Sign me up. But what has been your recipe to revenue? What's been your secret sauce?
Our recipe to revenue, and it's one thing. The day I realized we were not a CPG item and we were an agricultural good, that was a turning point for us. The CPG playbook, demographics, benefits, uses, like who's the demographic for a banana? Like that's where we're playing. Like we're agricultural good with the season and a harvest. We can't engineer it any way, pro or con. We just make sure the quality is the highest.
Right.
So that was a fundamental shift. And I credit one of our distribution partners in produce that just said, why do you have a nutrition panel on this? You can't guarantee that. And I was like, that's interesting. Now we still don't have clarity from anyone if we have to have it or not. So we have them. But that moment of like, wow, we are a seasonally harvested good. And we've been marketing this completely wrong. We've been putting it in the wrong part of the store.
Yeah.
That was a shift. And so again, looking more berry or agricultural good has been, it's been a game changer.
Yeah. So getting a better sense, knowing who you are and less about, like you have to educate on the uses of it, not, selling people on that you'll love it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not trying to compete with 20 other, X products. We have more of a category problem. We have a brand problem.
Right. Absolutely.
On the honeycomb category more so, thank goodness we have a format that introduces new people to the category. So that's been, our recipe to success has been understanding we're an agricultural good and not a CPG item.
That's an important one. That's a great advice for everybody out there, really understand who you are.
Do something better. Yeah. Getting truthful. Like what really are we?
Yeah.
And that took a while for us. It took me probably a couple years and a couple $1 million to like finally realize like, no wonder this didn't work.
Like if I'd only thought about this earlier, but you know what? You learn a lot along the way. There's a lot of lessons that got you to where you are.
So we're taking our lumps, but we're winning more than we're losing, which is, I guess, a net positive on my day.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned some of the stores where people can find you in, and where else can they find you online and elsewhere?
Freshhoneycomb.com is our website, and it is, if you want to learn anything about our sourcing practices, our landscape requirements, like we have to go a little deeper than your average bear. I would say the website's almost academic because my wife, the academic, is who really led the charge there. So you can go down a couple rabbit holes in that, and then we have a lot of recipes and uses on there as well. But that's probably the best information spot, and then go to your local retailers and ask them to carry it. And then if you have a restaurant or a chef, definitely, ask them to contact us. Douglas at honeyfeelbetter.com.
Yes. All you chefs listening, reach out to Douglas and let's get creative, figure out how to use these in your dishes.
Very cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us on Recipe to Revenue. So excited to see what your journey takes us, and I'm going to go buy some honeycomb.
Love it. Please do.
All right. Thanks. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.